more than human.
Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is J.R. Carroll. I am the author of the More Than Human novels, and today I am doing my top 10 author list. This is the first time that I've done a top 10 authors list, and this is a very fluid list. Um, in fantasy books, I'm about 200 books in or so I'm still kind of new to this. And it's very likely that next year this list will be jumbled up, especially in the top, in the bottom, five or six authors. And there's a few authors that I'm about to tell you as honorable mentions that could easily, upon the next book I read, jump into the list. But before we dive in, make sure that you like, subscribe, do all those good things to push this video out to more people. Check out my Patreon if you want to help out the channel as well as my writing for as little as $1. You could pick the next book I read. Now let's jump into the list. I have two honorable mentions, and like I said a minute ago, in the next book I read, they could very well jump into the list. And that is Joe Abercrombie and Brandon Sanderson. Now, I have read the first three books in the First Law trilogy by Joe Abercrombie, and I love them. It's been a while, since I've, read the last book in this series there. And he has another trilogy and a bunch of standalones. I've heard nothing but good things from him, but I will say that the characters have stuck with me, but the story hasn't stuck with me as hard, and that's why it's an honorable mention. But like I said, the next book could push him right into the list. And then Brandon Sanderson, he has kind of the opposite. I loved Mistborn. I've read the first four books in the Mistborn series. Loved the very first book. One of my favorite one of my favorite books of all time. The next two were just so, and then I liked the first book in the second era, but it didn't wow me. It was just I liked it. So I'm continuing Mistborn Era 2, so the next one could jump him into the list. But let's get into the top 10. And now, number 10 is going to be a controversial pick. And I'm picking this author because of the last book I've read. The newest book that he's written has stayed with me. It was one of my favorite books of last year, but it just continues to be in my mind, which is definitely a good thing, because a lot of books don't just stick with me and I keep thinking about them, but just the cyberpunk nature and the invasiveness of technology that he wove into it. And I am talking about the biggest booktuber on the planet, Daniel Greene. I know his first two books were not so, like, they were thought of as all right, or saw a lot of people said maybe a little bit subpar. I thought they were okay, but his newest book, Neon Ghost, A Witch's Sin, like I said, it just stayed with me. And maybe if he gets another book out before Joe or Brandon, he can hold his spot here in the top 10, because I really, really like Neon Ghost. So let's go to number 9. And this will be probably my favorite horror author, Brian Keene. And I believe I've read 3 or 4 of his books. And The Rising, the 2 books in The Rising are my favorite horror books. Just magnificent. He is great, maybe one of the best at writing evil, villainous characters. I mean, Ob is one of the all-time greatest bad guys. If you haven't read The Rising, you have to. Now, number 8 is a new author to me, and I've read 4 books by her. And actually, the first book I ever read by her was her newest book. It was a novella, Untethered Skies. And then I went on to read the Greenbone Saga, and that is Fonda Lee. Fonda Lee is an amazing author. I mean, I just loved the mafia style, storytelling, kind of small scale. I mean, it's a big scale, but also kind of a small scale story that she told within the Greenbone Saga, and it was great. And as I always kind of pick on whenever I do the reviews for the book, is like, if you pick up a Fonda Lee book, you're getting some sex scenes in a fantasy book. It's just gonna happen. She loves that stuff. But Fonda Lee is great, and I can't wait to see what she does next. And let's move on to number 7. And this guy's book series, this guy is blowing up everywhere. He's about to turn Cradle into an animated series as a self-pub author. He is what I aspire to be when I grow up, even though we're probably the same age. And that is Will Wight. I was so addicted to Cradle. And I have reviewed both of his books in the last Horizon. He's an inspiration to all self-pub authors, and he is a amazing author himself. He knows how to write comedy and levity into serious situations. If you have not checked out Cradle, you have to. Make sure you do it before, so you can say I did it before it was cool, because once that anime hits, he's going to the moon. And number 6 will be everyone's pal, George R.R. Martin. Now, I know a lot of people would kick him off their list because we've been waiting 13 years for the 6th book, but I read all 5 books last year, and I was enthralled like everybody else the first time through. So now I'm waiting like everybody else. Hopefully, there's always that debate on will he finish the series. I think we'll get the next book. I don't know if he'll be around to finish the last one, though. But yes, A Song of Ice and Fire is one of the greatest series of all time, and I loved every minute that I was in that world. Now let's break into the top 5 with number 5, and that is Richard Kadrey, Mr. Sandman Slim himself. I have read, I believe, 14 books by him. 2 years ago, my first year on BookTube, he had the Book of the Year, which wasn't even part of Sandman Slim, but it was called The Grand Dark, and it was a dystopian, I wouldn't say I wouldn't say steampunk, it was more of a biopunk type of world, and just amazing. And then I read his newest book, The Dead Take the A Train, this year, and I think he dropped like 2 more books, so I got to read those. But Dead Take the A Train was an awesome, just stab 'em up, magic, killing monsters, demon slaying book. Amazing. Richard Kadrey is a super great guy. I actually got to interview him last year, I think it was, and just one of the nicest guys. But number 4, we're getting into the top 4, the final 4, and this is Pierce Brown, Mr. Red Rising himself. And yes, Red Rising is everything it was cracked up to be. I wasn't sure when I first started because everybody told me, you gotta read Red Rising. And I did, and I couldn't stop. I didn't think I had enough time to get caught up till Lightbringer, but I just blew through those books, did like 2 a month. And yes, his prose are amazing. His character work is amazing. I mean, I'm not sure that this guy has a flaw aside from the fact that his books just keep getting bigger. Yeah, it all he has to do is just keep his books under 800 pages, and it will be fantastic. Paris Brown, just an amazing guy. Would love to talk to him as well. But let's get into the final three. Now, when I was making this list, I automatically threw these three into the top three. And it wasn't too hard to put them in order either, but I just knew that they were top three. They've been three of my favorite authors. And number three is Craig Alanson. And I have read 16 books by Craig Alanson, all in the Expeditionary Force world. And it is my favorite sci-fi series of all time, some of my favorite characters of all time, and nobody does dialogue better than Craig Alanson. If you love dialogue, you love space operas, Craig is your man. You will love it. Some of the funniest things I've ever read in a fantasy sci-fi book. I crack up every time I read one of his books. I mean, just comedy gold inside of serious situations as well. Now, who is the runner-up? Who's number 2 on the list? And that is going to be the man who is the king, Stephen King. In fact, I have read 14 books of Stephen King's. I've read all the books in the Dark Tower, and then right now I have Carrie, I have Elevation, Cujo. The newest one I've read Fairy Tale, and then the last book I read by Stephen King was Pet Sematary, and my God, it was a masterpiece. Just a fantastic, perfect book. I don't think there's anything you could do to that book to make it better. It's one of my favorite. It was one of my favorite books of 2023. And I'm going to just continue reading Stephen King books. And maybe one day I'll have them all under my belt, but maybe that'll be years down the road, as he continues to write book after book into his mid-70s. So, who's number 1? If you know me at all, you know Jim Butcher is number 1. I have read 22 books by Jim Butcher. 20 books inside of the Dresden Files, including the side stories and the law. And then I've read both of his Cinder Spire books series, which are, he is undoubtedly, no one will debate, he is the king of urban fantasy. And I think with the Cinder Spire series, after the second book, he might be the king of steampunk. I mean, I call him the GOAT. He's the greatest of all time. And I'm about to get, next month, I am putting the first book in his Codex Alera series on my TBR. So, and he has another 6-book series in that. So, another 6 books I'll have of his under my belt probably by the end of the year. Maybe we'll get another Dresden at the end of the year. Who knows? But yes, that is the list. That is the top 10, and Jim Butcher sits on the throne. Let me know where I got it wrong. Let me know where I got it right. Hit me up in the comments. My January giveaway is still active. For every comment, you enter yourself in more times, because I'm going to go through all my comments this month, and I'm just going to pick a random winner to receive a free book. So I can't wait. Like I said, let me know in the comments what I got right, what I got wrong. But more importantly, be more than human.